You think Rome was the pinnacle of Western civilization? But today I'm going to tell you that's completely wrong. There was an empire stronger, richer, and lasting twice as long as Rome. They controlled global trade for nearly a millennium, possessed a secret weapon that could set the ocean on fire, and built the most impregnable city humanity has ever seen. But history has almost erased their name from the textbooks. Today we're talking about Byzantium, the empire the whole world forgot, but which was actually the greatest superpower of the Middle Ages. First, please hit the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel so that whenever we release our latest video, you'll be the first to know. Thank you so much. Now let's get started. In 476, Rome fell. The Western Roman Empire collapsed, barbarians poured in, and the world plunged into the Dark Ages. That's what the textbooks teach us. But there's a truth few people mention. Rome didn't really die in 476. The eastern half remained standing, and they didn't just survive, they dominated. While the West descended into chaos with barbarian kingdoms fighting each other, the East continued thriving like a machine that never stopped. They called themselves Romaioi, Romans, and their capital was Constantinople, the most magnificent city in the world at that time. Why do we call them Byzantine instead of Roman? That's a trick by later Western historians. In the 16th century, when Europe wanted to emphasize that only they were the legitimate heirs of Rome, they coined the name Byzantine to diminish the Eastern Empire. But the truth is, these people spoke Greek, followed Orthodox Christianity, and considered themselves authentic Romans until their very last day. And they survived until 1453. Over 1,000 years, double the time Western Rome ever stood. This wasn't a weak empire on its deathbed, but a military, economic, and cultural superpower superior to any nation in the Middle Ages. So why were they so powerful? Imagine a city that for 800 years no one could conquer, not for lack of trying, but because it was genuinely impossible. Constantinople sat in the most perfect location on earth at that time. One side bordered the sea, two sides were the Bosphorus Strait and the Golden Horn, with only one side touching the mainland. And on that mainland side, they built 3 layers of massive walls. The first wall stood 8 meters high, thick enough for horses to run on top. Behind it was a moat 20 meters wide, deep enough that no army could cross without being shot to pieces. And behind the moat was the second wall, higher and thicker. Then another wide gap to trap enemy forces. Finally came the third wall, 12 meters high, with watchtowers densely packed every 55 meters. From up high, Byzantine archers could shoot across all 3 defensive layers. This wasn't just a wall, but a multi-tiered defense system designed to crush any attack. If the enemy broke through the first wall, they'd be trapped in the moat and shot dead. If they crossed the moat, they'd face an even higher second wall. And if they desperately breached the second wall, they still had the third wall, where Byzantium's elite forces were waiting. For over 800 years, these walls witnessed countless sieges. The Avars came in 626 with 80,000 troops and a massive Slav fleet. They were crushed. The Arabs besieged it from 674 to 678, using the full might of the Umayyad Caliphate, one of the most powerful empires at that time. They also failed. In 717, the Arabs returned with 120,000 troops and 1,800 warships, and once again, Constantinople stood firm. But how could they defeat such a massive fleet? This is when Byzantium brought out what every opponent feared: Greek fire. Imagine you're an Arab sailor on a wooden warship heading toward Constantinople. You see smaller Byzantine ships with fewer men. You think this is an easy victory, and then you spot something strange on the bow of the enemy ship, a large bronze tube pointing straight at you. A second later, a stream of greenish-blue flame shoots from that tube, spreading across the water like a giant serpent. The fire clings to your ship's wood, burning fiercely and unable to be extinguished. You try seawater, but the fire only burns stronger. It sticks to flesh, to armor, to everything it touches. Within minutes, your entire fleet becomes a sea of flames. That was Greek fire, the secret weapon Byzantium kept hidden for over 400 years. Its formula was so strictly guarded that even today we still don't know exactly what it was made of. Historians believe it may have been a mixture of crude oil, sulfur, quicklime, and resin, but no one's certain. The only thing we know is that it burned on water, couldn't be extinguished, and caused absolute terror for any fleet daring to attack Constantinople. In 678, when the Arabs were decimated by Greek fire, they never dared besiege Constantinople by sea again. This weapon saved Byzantium from destruction at least 3 times in history and helped it maintain control of the Mediterranean Sea for centuries. But military strength was only part of it. What truly made Byzantium a superpower was money. If you lived in the 10th century and wanted to become wealthy, there was only one place you needed to go: Constantinople. This city wasn't just the political capital, but also the global trade hub. Every trade route from Europe to Asia had to pass through here. Silk from China, spices from India, and gold from Africa all flowed through Constantinople, and Byzantium taxed all of it. While Western kingdoms were bartering because they didn't have enough coins in circulation, Byzantium had a developed monetary economy with the gold solidus, also called the numisma. This coin had such stable gold content that it became the international standard for over 800 years. Merchants from Baghdad to London, from Venice to Kiev, all accepted the solidus as the world's most trusted currency. Constantinople at that time had a population of about 500,000, 10 times larger than most European cities. Streets were paved with stone, with drainage systems, public street lighting, and even free hospitals for the poor. While Paris and London were still muddy towns with populations of a few tens of thousands, Constantinople already had the spacious Macy Avenue, where thousands of stalls sold everything from Persian silk to Baltic amber. And while Western Europe sank into the Dark Ages, Constantinople still glowed with the golden light of massive churches, with Hagia Sophia, the greatest architectural achievement of that era, where the dome ceiling, 56 meters high, made everyone who entered feel like they were standing beneath the sky itself. But being wealthy also meant being in danger, because when you're the richest, everyone wants to rob you. Byzantium wasn't an empire living in peace. They lived in a world where every neighbor was an enemy. To the north were the fierce Bulgars, to the east were the mighty Persians, then the Arabs, then the Seljuk Turks. To the west were the greedy Crusader kingdoms, always wanting to plunder Constantinople, and to the south were Mediterranean pirates always lurking. Byzantium didn't just have to fight one opponent, but dozens of opponents at once, and they survived 1,000 years not through luck, but through a military and diplomatic system so sophisticated that scholars today still study it. First, they never fought unnecessary battles. War was expensive, so Byzantium often used gold to buy peace. They paid the Bulgars to attack the Hungarians. They paid the Khazars to attack the Persians. They turned enemies of enemies into allies without spilling a drop of blood. This tactic was called Byzantine diplomacy, and it was incredibly effective. But when they had to fight, they fought smart. The Byzantine army wasn't a bunch of barbarians charging in to hack and slash. They were tactical experts trained systematically, with military textbooks detailed down to every step. Emperor Maurice's Strategicon, written in the 6th century, was one of the most profound military works of ancient times, showing how to defeat each type of opponent, from Persians to Slavs. Byzantium also had some of the world's best cavalry, called cataphracts, fully armored in heavy armor, riding large war horses, and equipped with bows, spears, and swords. They could shoot arrows while galloping at full speed, then charge into close combat with the power of medieval tanks. And most importantly, they had the theme defense system, dividing the empire into autonomous military zones, where peasants were given land in exchange for military service. When the invasion came, they didn't need to wait for the army from the capital to arrive, but could respond immediately. But even with all these strengths, Byzantium still nearly got wiped out multiple times. In 1071, Byzantium faced its greatest disaster in history. At the Battle of Manzikert, Emperor Romanos IV was catastrophically defeated by the Seljuk Turks and captured alive. Nearly all of Anatolia, the heart of the empire, fell into Turkish hands. Many historians thought this was the end for Byzantium, but they were wrong. While European kingdoms collapsed after a major defeat, Byzantium had something no one else had: the ability to resurrect. They'd done this many times in history. In the 7th century, they lost nearly all territory to the Persians and Arabs, but decades later, they'd recovered most of it. In the 11th century, they lost Anatolia, but thanks to the brilliant emperor Alexios I, they recovered again. Alexios III was a military and diplomatic genius. When he took the throne in 1081, the empire was on the verge of collapse. Turkish forces occupied Anatolia, the Normans attacked from the west, Pechenegs poured in from the north. Alexios didn't have enough troops to defeat everyone, so he used gold and diplomacy. He paid the Cumans to fight the Pechenegs. He allied with Venice to fight the Normans. And he called on Pope Urban II to organize a crusade to help Byzantium fight the Turks. Alexios's plan worked almost perfectly. In 1095, the First Crusade began, and although these Western knights were crude and difficult to control, they helped Byzantium recover most of Anatolia. The empire once again rose from the brink. But the greatest danger didn't come from outside enemies. It came from those Byzantium once considered allies. In 1204, the unimaginable happened. Constantinople, the impregnable city that had stood for over 800 years, finally fell. But not to the Arabs, not to the Turks, but to Crusader knights from Europe, those who should have been allies. The Fourth Crusade initially aimed to attack Egypt, but due to a lack of funds, they were manipulated by Venice and redirected to attack Constantinople. The reason? Constantinople was the richest city in the world, and these crusaders wanted to plunder it. On April 12, 1204, they attacked from the sea, climbing tall ships to scale the walls. And for 3 days, they ransacked Constantinople more savagely than any barbarian attack. They destroyed ancient statues, burned libraries, massacred civilians, and seized everything of value. Priceless art treasures from ancient Greek and Roman times were destroyed or shipped back to Venice and other European cities. Byzantium shattered into many small pieces. Constantinople was ruled by a fake Roman Empire established by Westerners. Byzantine nobility had to flee to Nicaea, Trebizond, and Epirus to maintain legitimacy. But once again, they didn't give up. In 1261, Emperor Michael VIII Palaiologos recaptured Constantinople in a daring coup and restored the Byzantine Empire. However, by this time, they were only a shadow of themselves. The gold had run out, the army was weakened, and the territory was just scattered patches of land around Constantinople and some areas in Greece. Meanwhile, a new enemy was rising, the Ottomans. In 1453, Constantinople was just a small island in a sea of Ottoman territory. The Byzantine Empire had shrunk to just the capital and a few small cities, but they still hadn't given up. Sultan Mehmed II, an ambitious 21-year-old, was determined to conquer Constantinople to prove himself worthy of the throne. He assembled 80,000 troops, over 300 warships, and, most importantly, he brought massive cannons designed by Hungarian engineer Orban, each capable of firing 600-kilo stone balls. Inside Constantinople, Emperor Constantine V only had 7,000 people, including civilians. No reinforcements, no miracle. Only the walls that had stood for 1,000 years, and the final belief that God would not let the city fall. The siege lasted 53 days. Each day, the massive cannons pounded the walls, sections of wall collapsed, but each night, the Byzantines patched them back up with wooden barrels and earthen stones. Mehmed II tried attacking from the sea but was blocked by iron chains, so he had 70 warships dragged overland to enter the Golden Horn. The battle raged fiercely, hour by hour, minute by minute. On May 29, 1453, Mehmed II ordered the final assault. Tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers rushed up the walls under a rain of arrows and stones. The Byzantines fought for every inch, but they were too few. A small gate called Kirkoporta had been left unlocked by mistake, and Ottoman forces poured in. Emperor Constantine I Palaiologos, the last ruler of Byzantium, removed all his imperial insignia and charged into battle like an ordinary soldier. He said, "The empire is lost, and I'm still alive?" Then he disappeared into the mass of Ottoman soldiers. No one ever found his body. Constantinople fell. Byzantium, an empire that lasted over 1,000 years, officially ended. But their legacy did not. Byzantium wasn't just an empire, but a bridge between the ancient world and the modern world. While Western Europe sank into the Dark Ages, Byzantium preserved the knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome. Byzantine monasteries copied thousands of works of philosophy, mathematics, and medicine, without which the European Renaissance would never have happened. When Constantinople fell, Byzantine scholars fled to Italy, bringing with them precious books and knowledge that sparked Europe's cultural explosion. Byzantium also spread Orthodox Christianity to Russia, the Balkans, and Eastern Europe, shaping the culture of hundreds of millions of people to this day. They developed magnificent mosaic art, massive domed architecture, and sacred choral music that became the foundation for medieval art. And most importantly, they proved that a civilization can survive, adapt, and thrive, even when the entire world around it is collapsing. So next time someone tells you that Rome was the pinnacle of civilization, remember that Byzantium lasted twice as long, was richer, and was more powerful than any empire in the Middle Ages. They were only forgotten by history, but now you know the truth.